Ever feel like you're clinging to the roller coaster of life?
Just kind of waiting for that next unexpected twist. The world can feel pretty chaotic sometimes.
Absolutely.
Right.
Well, today's deep dive is all about finding peace in the midst of all that chaos.
And our guide is none other than President Henry B. Eyring.
And he offers a really compelling perspective in his April 2024 General Conference talk, All Will Be Well Because of Temple Covenants.
We've got excerpts from that talk ready to go.
Perfect.
Because I think we all crave that sense of all will be well.
Yes.
Especially when life throws its worst, right?
Absolutely. And President Eyring uses a powerful story from his own life to illustrate just that.
Okay, let's unpack this.
He starts by taking us back to a seemingly ordinary day in June of 1976.
He and his wife Kathy are driving to the Idaho Falls Temple for a friend's sealing.
It's a happy occasion.
Exactly. But as they're leaving the temple...
They're met with news that changes everything.
Oh.
The Teton Dam has collapsed.
Oh, wow.
Now, most people listening may not be familiar with the scale of this disaster.
Right. Give us some context.
Imagine 80 billion gallons of water.
That's enough to fill over 120,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools.
Wow.
Suddenly surging through the landscape.
Wiping out entire towns, displacing thousands.
So it was a catastrophe.
And in those days, long before cell phones
Right.
or the internet, imagine the feeling of being completely cut off.
Unable to even reach their 4 children back in Rexburg?
It's that agonizing feeling of helplessness that makes President Eyring's next words so powerful.
He talks about how his wife, Kathy, unable to sleep that night,
Asks him, how? How can you sleep at a time like this?
and his response. Kathy, whatever the outcome, all will be well because of the temple.
Wow, that's a powerful statement.
Especially in the face of such uncertainty and fear.
Right. And that's exactly what makes this deep dive so fascinating.
What is it about the temple, about the covenants we make there?
They can bring that kind of peace.
Even amidst a crisis of that magnitude.
It's like he's tapping into a different level of trust.
A deeper well of strength.
But what does that even mean? All will be well because of the temple.
He's talking about the eternal nature of the covenants we make.
See, when we make covenants in the temple, we're not just making promises for this life.
They extend into the eternities.
So it's more than just till death do us part. It goes beyond this life.
Yeah.
We're talking about a commitment that transcends mortality.
It's like promising to love and support your family, not just in this life, but forever.
And that understanding, that connection that extends beyond the here and now,
That's what brought President Eyring peace in that moment of crisis.
it's almost like having that eternal perspective.
That longer view, it somehow shrinks the problems of the present, doesn't it?
It really does.
And President Eyring touches on that feeling in his talk, too.
He talks about entering the Salt Lake Temple for the first time as a young man.
And being overcome by this profound sense of familiarity.
Like he'd been there before.
Exactly.
But he realized it wasn't just a memory from this life.
But a sense of remembering a sacred experience from before he was even born.
Oh, wow.
I get chills just thinking about it.
I bet.
And, you know, I think many people who've been through the temple would say they felt something similar.
That sense of coming home.
Of being connected to something bigger than themselves.
Right.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting for me.
President Eyring goes on to quote President Nelson.
Who has said some pretty powerful things about temple covenants lately.
And he emphasizes how essential they are, especially today.
Absolutely.
President Nelson has been very direct about this.
He said, the safest place to be spiritually is inside your temple covenants.
It's like he's saying that the covenants themselves are a refuge,
Mm-hmm.
a source of protection in a world that often feels anything but safe.
Right.
And that's not all. Right. There's that other quote.
Everything we believe, every promise God has made to his covenant people comes together in the temple.
Okay, unpack that one for me.
What does that even mean?
He's getting at the heart of the covenant relationship we have with God.
It's not just about following rules or checking boxes.
It's about aligning our very beings with his will.
Accessing his power and receiving the fullness of his blessings.
And those blessings, that divine connection.
That's where true peace and security come from.
It reminds me of that other quote we see sometimes.
God will not abandon his relationship with those who have forged such a bond with him.
Exactly.
And it's a two-way bond.
We make sacred promises to God, and in return,
He promises to bless us with his constant companionship.
his guidance and his love no matter what.
There's that incredible sense of hope and reassurance in that, don't you think?
Absolutely.
But it also makes you think about what it really means to live those covenants.
To make them an active part of our lives every single day.
Not just something we do once in a while.
President Eyring talks about that too.
He emphasizes that it's not enough to just make the covenants.
We need to nurture them.
Revisit them and let them shape our thoughts and actions on a daily basis.
So it's like a relationship, right?
Yeah.
It requires effort and attention if it's going to thrive.
Exactly.
And one of the ways he suggests we nurture that relationship is through frequent temple attendance.
It's about creating that consistent connection, that pattern of seeking refuge in the temple, in those covenants,
Right.
because it's within the walls of the temple that we're reminded of those eternal truths.
We'd feel the Spirit most strongly.
And we receive personalized guidance and revelation for our own lives.
It's like that feeling you were talking about, that sense of coming home.
Of reconnecting with who we really are and what truly matters.
Right. And, speaking of what truly matters.
President Eyring doesn't shy away from the importance of family in all of this.
Absolutely.
He talks about how temple covenants strengthen families.
Offering protection against things like selfishness and pride, which can really tear people apart.
And he's not just talking about some abstract concept of family here.
Right.
He actually gives concrete examples of how we can strengthen those bonds.
He talks about creating a culture of service and compassion within our families.
Teaching our children to pray for and support one another.
To really see and care for each other's needs.
Because at the end of the day, our families are our most important relationships, aren't they?
Yeah.
It's where we learn to love, to serve, and to weather the storms of life together.
Right.
And that strong family unit.
Bound together by eternal covenants. That's what becomes an anchor in the storms of life.
It's what gave President Eyring and his wife that deep sense of peace.
Even in the face of the Teton Dam crisis.
It's like building that spiritual foundation for our families.
Brick by brick, with covenants as the mortar that holds it all together.
What a great analogy.
Because when the storms come, and they will come.
That foundation is what helps us withstand the winds and the floods.
There's this other part in President Eyring's talk that really stuck with me.
He shares some advice that he and his wife received from Elder Spencer W. Kimball on their wedding day.
Oh, love this part.
What did Elder Kimball say?
He told them, live so that when the call comes,
you can walk away easily.
Now, on the surface, that might sound like it's just about being ready to accept a calling in the church.
Right. But I think it goes so much deeper than that.
What do you mean?
Well, imagine for a second that your life is so cluttered.
So weighed down by worldly possessions, ambitions.
And commitments that pull you in a million different directions.
Could you truly answer any call, whether it's from the Lord or from someone in need?
Without hesitation.
Or would you be held back by those entanglements?
That's such a powerful way to look at it.
It's about living with a certain lightness.
A readiness to respond to whatever life throws our way.
Exactly.
And I think that's where the temple comes in again.
Because when we center our lives around our covenants,
when those eternal promises become our priority,
it naturally helps us to let go of the things that don't really matter.
It's like those covenants give us the clarity to see what's truly important, to simplify our lives and focus on what brings lasting joy.
And in that simplification,
in that alignment with God's will, we find this incredible freedom.
We're no longer bound by the fear of the unknown. Because we know that no matter what happens...
we're not facing it alone.
So it's not that life suddenly becomes easy.
Or that challenges disappear.
Right.
But we face them with a different perspective.
A deeper well of strength to draw from.
Precisely.
Because we have access to divine guidance.
We have the strength that comes from keeping our promises to God.
And we have the unwavering support of our eternal families, both here and in the eternities.
Wow.
When you put it that way, it really does make all be well.
Yeah, it really does.
And that's the beauty of President Eyring's message.
It's a message of hope.
Of resilience, and ultimately of peace that transcends our circumstances.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into President Eyring's powerful words...
what would you say is the most important takeaway for our listeners today?
I think it's this.
Temple covenants are not just rituals or obligations.
They are a lifeline.
They offer us access to a kind of peace and strength that the world simply cannot give.
And it's never too early or too late to start building that foundation of faith in our own lives.
And maybe that's the best reminder of all.
No matter where we are in our journey, no matter what storms we're facing,
we can always turn to our covenants, to that relationship with God.
And find the peace and strength to weather any storm.
Beautifully said.
And if you're listening to this and feeling that chaos,
that uncertainty in your own life, ask yourself this.
How can you make your covenants a more central part of your life?
How can you draw on those promises?
that connection to God, to bring greater peace and direction.
Those are questions worth pondering, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
And sometimes those quiet moments of reflection
Those personal deep dives into the things that matter most.
are exactly what we need to find our way back to that place of peace.